So we're here with distinguished Professor Philippe-Joseph Salazar for Don't Party. What is rhetoric and what is its ultimate value within the framework of politics?
Rhetoric is the fact that in public life we constantly debate and argue with each other on the basis of how we perceive facts. And that is a study of rhetoric, and this is a field which I've basically established on the continent, I would say. I'm not saying that, I mean the literature says so. That is rhetoric, proper.
Let's talk about Donald Trump for a second.
He's a remarkable orator. He has a sure sense of what an audience wants. A good speaker, to a great extent, impersonates the audience. And the audience thinks, it's exactly what I thought. I could not have put it better than that. And then you know that you had an impact. And it's exactly what Trump and Sanders have been doing.
Do you think it is possible to classify Trump's campaign and the rhetoric upon which it is based as extremist?
I don't think so. He's talking to the middle class. In fact, he has been very sweeping those states, literally, from the beginning, because he's targeting the middle class. So I can't call that extremist at all.
Okay, many of the things that he has said that have been widely publicized, such as the idea of building a wall to keep immigrants out, that kind of statement and that kind of rhetoric, does that move closer to what we perceive as extremist?
It's not that kind of rhetoric. It's an argument he's making. So when you say that kind of rhetoric, you understand what you're saying, but just stop one second and look at it truly rhetorically. That is, what sort of argument he's making, because it is an argument. So he's making an argument lining up. And he summarizes the argument in a very vivid manner by saying, there must be a wall. Whether it will be a real wall or not, we don't know, but the wall already exists, or long stretches of the border in any case. So, when you make an argument, you have to line up perceptions that people have, jobs, bad education, the 65 life expectancy for a large section of the white middle class in the middle states, not the two coasts. You line them up, but then you have to find a vivid image that creates a movement of emotion. Emotion makes you move, motion, move, and it's a wall. An argument remains abstract unless you attach an image to it. Let's move on to something that could be more generically classified as extremist. ISIS,
the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. The rhetoric that they employ, is it rhetoric? And if so, why is it so successful?
It's a big question. So let me deal with the way that is the caliphate, the remarkable propaganda media center of the caliphate, which is employing very, very bright people. What did they do, the propaganda machine or bureau, if you want, of the caliphate? After the assault on Paris, because it was a commando assault, these are special services troops, make no mistake. They followed that attack with two propaganda assaults, which was very carefully timed. They began by a communiqué, and the French press rushed onto the communiqué without reading it. They interpreted the communiqué as a claim. No, it wasn't a claim. It was a victory bulletin constructed according to the way in the Arab Muslim world arguments are functioning. And this is something I've been saying for a year now. If we really want to understand how the propaganda of the caliphate functions, we have to mold ourselves in the Arab Muslim or Islamic way of arguing. So it's a different rhetorical world. This is the story of the flag. Black for us means something, black for the followers of the caliphate, and the Muslims means something else. It is the color of the prophet.
Could you give us maybe another example of how Muslim rhetoric is different to what we are used to?
I'll give you an example. When we argue in politics, we tend to argue rationally. If A and B, C. If this and this, that. This is how we argue in the Western world. If we were rhetorically arguing in public life, we would use parables, images and metaphors all the time, but we don't. the way we are debating now goes back to Greece and Rome, and this is how we argue. Let's call it rhetoric. That is the technology of persuasion. Analogy plays an essential role. You can argue with images. You can argue with stories. You can argue with hyperboles. We can't. The minute a politician starts doing that, we suspend belief. We think, come on now, be rational. Because we do believe that when you make a choice in politics, it's a rational choice. In the Arab Muslim world, it is entirely different. Analogy plays a key role.
Does that mean that it is harder or even impossible for a Western person to understand, even if translated to English, the rhetoric of ISIS?
No, it isn't. What we have to do here is stopping being so Eurocentric. What I mean by that we tend to think that the whole world argues like us, makes arguments like us, debate like us. No, it is not the case. And what the Caliphate has illustrated in a very sharp light, that it is not the case. They do not argue as we do. They do not debate as we do. And they are extremely persuasive.
To get back to South African
look
on extremism and rhetoric, do you think there are any examples of extremist rhetoric in our current political discourse? The EFF, for example.
This country has known a lot of extremism in the past. I won't enter into detail, we all know what it is. Okay. And I think it's pretty wary of it. That's my first answer. I think the spirit of reconciliation is still at work, whatever people say, that is South Africans want to live happily together. So there's hardly any room for extremism.
With Nkandla.
Yeah.
What was the kind of rhetoric employed by Zuma here, and was it an example of successful rhetoric?
I try to see it with Zulu eyes. He's a chief of sorts, and I think from their viewpoint, their argument is there's nothing odd about Nkandla. So I try to project myself, in that argument, and there I draw the conclusion that there is nothing wrong with it. Now I cast myself in a DA vision of the world, which is made of rational arguments with rational choices and applying the law, and there I say that I see their viewpoint. This is called public life.
So, is it possible that differing rhetorics amongst different groups of persons could ever lead to a distortion and a miscommunication that is unresolvable, as is perhaps the case in South Africa as in between ISIS and the West?
Prejudices take over very rapidly, emotions take over very rapidly, and audiences are heterogeneous. And when an audience or a public is really heterogeneous, it's very difficult to resolve the problem. What you can do is maneuver, fudge, delay, which I think they are doing at the moment. I think the ANC itself is very heterogeneous, rhetorically heterogeneous. Arguments exchanged are not always at the same level. They don't listen to each other. They will have to.